Oh, Doctor, we've heard about you. So, we're still in the dry period between seasons, and I'm starting to have a hard time thinking of stuff to do for the Sunday slots. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to drill in more specifically on something that I've actually touched on before. Now, a little while back, I did a video sort of highlighting some of the key differences between classic era Doctor Who and modern era Doctor Who. And one of the things I highlighted was the Doctor's reputation. And I want to drill into that a bit more deeply and really go into details about, at least for me, why I don't like how big the Doctor's rep has gotten in New Who. Now, it's worth pointing out that at the time of recording, which is between series 11 and 12, that seems to have been backed off. And actually, even in series 10, it seemed to have dialed back a little bit, which was nice. But for a very significant chunk of modern era Doctor Who, it was a way that I would prefer it wasn't. But first of all, what do I even mean about the Doctor's reputation? Well, you go back to classic era and the Doctor didn't really have one. Pretty much the only people he had any reputation with were people who we had actually seen him encounter before. The Daleks knew who he was. The Master knew who he was. You know, those folks definitely did. The Time Lords knew who he was. He had a reputation with them. But when he would just land on a planet and, you know, start dealing with whatever was going on there, whether it was a monster, whether it was a race of people, whether it was a madman, whatever it was, they didn't know who he was. When he said, "I'm the Doctor," they were just like, okay, whatever. They didn't know him. He was just coasting through. I mean, that's who the Doctor was in classic Who. Sometimes he was actually tossed places by the Time Lords, but for the most part, he would go from place to place, see something going wrong, and try and help, and then leave. Modern era, that started to shift. That was kind of the case with Eccleston, but when we got to Tennant, the Doctor started, or at least planted the seeds of treading on his reputation. Now, part of that started with the reputation of the Time Lords themselves. Now, I still have a fair amount of classic to get through, but at least from what I can see, the Time Lords didn't appear to be super well known by other races. The ones who did know about them were like, oh god, those guys. But they weren't like things of legend across the cosmos. In New Who, we did get that, and that was sort of where a lot of this started, because you would have characters like Mr. Finch, you know, say, oh, your race, they were so stuck up. Or, you know, Jabe going, the computer refused to identify you because you're supposed to all be dead. It seems like most civilized life forms know who the Time Lords are. And then, it was only a matter of time before pretty much everybody started to know who the Doctor was. Now, there's a couple of things to talk about here. Let me start by explaining why this bothers me, personally. The first is, and this is the big thing, honestly, and I'll mention other stuff, but the big thing is, it makes the universe small. If the Doctor can land somewhere that he's never been to before, and people know who he is, by name and reputation, if not on sight. He shouldn't be able to do that. The universe, it's supposed to be infinite. He can travel across the whole of time and space. He should not be getting recognized. The details shouldn't be getting retained that cleanly, generation after generation, that he is embedded in myths. in so many places. Like 1 place, 2 place, fine. But this much... And I'm not saying there's no way to justify it. I'll mention my dislike of this and people will be like, well, no, it makes sense because he can travel all across time and space and he'll go to all these places. So he's saved these people and he's built a legend. Like, regardless of the fact that he can travel all across time and space, he himself, last time we were given an age on him was 2,000 years. So if his average adventure last what? A day. Even if he was, even setting aside the fact that he didn't start traveling till the tail end of his first body, even setting that aside, there aren't enough hours in the day. He can't go that far, not with how many galaxies across how much time and how many civilizations. No, it makes the universe small and insular because everyone already knows him. I personally am fond of big worlds. And the quickest way to make a big world feel small is by having everything circle around the same handful of characters. It's actually one of the things that really bugs me about Star Wars at this point. And actually, it's a big part of why I didn't really get into the expanded universe stuff. I mean, some of it maybe I would have enjoyed, but a lot of it centered around Han, Luke, and Leia. And yeah, they can keep having adventures or whatever, but because of the need to up the scale, they were still, leading the big galaxy-saving conflicts. Like, literally, everything seems to circle around these people, around this family, around the Skywalkers. Now their kids are super important. Like, is there no one else in the galaxy who matters? No, it's just this family? Okay, great. And it's that kind of impact when the Doctor is so ubiquitous that people tell him, we get the word Doctor from you. No, that for me, that should not be the case because it makes everything small. The universe is supposed to be huge and expansive and too big for anyone, human, Time Lord, I don't care, to ever know fully. That's part of the Doctor's charm at his best. And I keep saying he because most of the Doctors have been male, but I'm not saying that to disregard Whittaker because she actually understands this. With the current iteration of the Doctor, she says, the universe will surprise you. That's why I keep traveling. And she's not the first one to point that out. The Doctor has said that in various incarnations across the entirety of his lifespan, of all the regenerations. And that is so important. There needs to be stuff that the Doctor hasn't seen. And like enough where they're not like scrounging to try and find it, but like that he can just hit a randomizer, land somewhere, never been. But it doesn't feel like that a lot of the time, especially as the stories have gotten more into the season arc thing. When stories were more self-contained, which again was a Classic Era thing, Classic Era didn't really do season arcs. It did it twice. It did it in The Key to Time and it did it in Trial of a Time Lord. Other than that, it didn't really do them. And the whatever impact was had in the individual story only ever came up again if the villains came back. That was it. But now, because of the emphasis on series arcs and the need to have the finale end in, oh, big, the universe is in danger thing, that does create a Doctor with a massive reputation. But it's something I don't care for. So when did this actually happen? I mentioned that the seeds got planted actually at the start of the modern era. Then we had the first time the Doctor treaded on his reputation, which was The Forest of the Dead. This is the second part of the Silence of the Library, Forest of the Dead two-parter. It's the one that introduced River's song. Now, he has this moment where the Vashta Nerada are coming for him. And he said, and keep in mind, if you don't remember off the top of your head, they're like a hive mind. And so they're all connected to each other. And they're all over this library. It says, I'm the Doctor, and you're in the biggest library in the universe. Look me up. And they back off. I don't hate that moment. The reason I don't hate that moment is because it's not actually his reputation. It's his actions that make them afraid. Because they don't know who he is by name. But when he tells them to look, and they do, and they make the connections, then they go, oh. And this may sound like pedantic and arbitrary, but I am actually not only okay with that, I do like that. I am okay with the idea that the Doctor's left enough of an impression that if someone, like the Vashnaraya, who had the ability to do it very quickly, were to sit down and like find all the stuff that the Doctor had done, go, oh crap! I'm totally fine with someone who has to make effort to learn what the Doctor has done, then having that reputation impact them. What I don't like is that people already know. They just know. They just know who he is. Or the legend of him. Or they've heard of him. No. That is that little step too far. And again, I know that can seem like splitting hairs, but it does make the difference for me. It's also why I am okay with the moment in the 11th hour, and I mentioned this in my review of that very episode. I am totally cool with the fact that the Doctor challenges the Atraxi by saying, is this planet defended? And they go through and they realize, oh, and it's basically, again, what the Vashnaraya did. Once they realized who he was by doing the legwork, they're like, ooh, okay, bye. That's fine. I'm good with that. Where it started to go overboard was, I would say, initially in the Pandorica Opens. It's a very cool moment when the Doctor, steps out and basically calls out all the aliens in their ships and basically dares them, says, let somebody else try first. And they all back off. Now, this one, as I said, kind of is the tipping point, because it's not all the way into the stuff I don't like yet, but it is basically right there. It is finely balanced on the edge, because yes, these races have a reason to fear him because they have dealt with him before, but this is him starting to turn away armies at the mention of his name, which we then basically see play out later on when we start getting into the silence and things like A Good Man Goes to War. And that one is actually really well worth pointing out, because I actually like A Good Man Goes to War as a story, and I like a lot of stuff that's done with River Song. One of the things I don't like about her is this whole idea that all this stuff was done to River Song and to Amy out of fear of the Doctor. And it would be one thing for me if that was being done by a race that had actually directly encountered and conflicted with him. But this is just people who know the Doctor's reputation. They haven't met him. They haven't seen him. They're going off of records of his encounters in other places, and they're building an army and kidnapping newborn babies and effectively employing a cult because of the Doctor's reputation. And when the Doctor's reputation gets so big that it's actually driving the plot, that's too big. The Doctor isn't just somebody traveling and trying to help anymore. Now the Doctor is Space Jesus. Which, I say that. That's a phrase actually most apt for end of Series 3, which was kind of before. Although, even end of Series 3, because there the Doctor is basically saved by his own legend and by enough people believing in him. Now, that doesn't have lasting impact because they do the stupid wind back time and retcon, which I hate. But that is kind of the same thing. I like my silly little doctor who dresses weird and has a kind heart and sometimes a cranky nature, hopping from planet to planet and helping because it's the right thing to do and because it's kind. I don't need the doctor to save the universe. And it happens so often. And for how often the Doctor has saved the universe, I get the outsized reputation that he's developed in the universe at this point. I do get it. But I don't like it. Maybe I'm weird. Because more often than not, I tend to like smaller stories over epic ones. My favorite film in the Star Wars franchise is A New Hope, which is arguably the smallest story. I also really like Rogue One for a similar reason. My favorite film in the Lord of the Rings series is Fellowship of the Ring, because it's got the smallest story, the smallest scale. And I like that more. It's more intimate. It feels more real. It feels more personal, because the stakes are mostly just for the people we see, not for the greater world that is full of people that we have never met and don't know. So maybe I'm the weird one. People seem to like their big epic stuff. And maybe I just spent the last, 15, 16 minutes or so being the cranky old guy going, "You kids, get off my lawn!" Because maybe I just don't get it. But that's me. And that's me getting off my chest my issues with the size of the Doctor's reputation. Again, it does seem to have gotten better in the last couple of series. Wasn't too bad in 10, wasn't too bad in 11. That specific aspect. There are other things, like, just don't start a thing about Series 11, please. Like, don't. But, the Doctor's reputation. What are your thoughts on it? Do you like it big? Do you like it small? Does what I have rambled about make any sense whatsoever? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. There's the like and subscribe button, both greatly appreciated. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support the channel and help me cover my bills and maybe even one day get to do this for a living. There is additionally links to things like a book I wrote and other social media platforms that I am on. Go check them out. Click on the links because they'll take you places, but you also don't have to, because at the end of the day, you are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.